My name is Nico de Jong, and I work for a company called Itchycraft. And at Itchycraft, we're all about building the ultimate employee experience. That is something you can build. That's something that you can bring to your employees. But what is the ultimate employee experience exactly? What is it if you don't measure it and ask these employees their own experience? So I'm happy to announce this webinar together with NGAGE, with Esben Rytter, about the time to measure the digital employee experience, because you cannot improve what you do not measure. And if you don't measure consistently, then you're never informed how to steer the employee experience in the right direction. The agenda for today is the following. I'll be introducing Esben, and he will be talking about measuring the digital employee experience. For that, of course, we should know what is digital experience, how should we define it, what is the importance of employee experience in the whole experience that that people have interacting with companies, and then how do we measure and improve what is the process for doing this. I have a couple of housekeeping items. This is a Teams live event, so we cannot see you on camera. We cannot listen to you, but you can leave questions that you have in the Q&A on the chat. So please do so. Then we will answer those at the end of this webinar. As I said before, for late arrivers, this session will be recorded and shared afterwards. So for point one, happy to announce Esben Rytter here. NGAGE is a partner of Itchycraft, and actually I've known Esben for many years. He is an expert in measuring, developing, and executing digital strategies, and for much longer than I've known him, he's been in this field of rolling out digital workplaces and improving the communication, collaboration, automation around that. He's also the founder of NGAGE, which is a consultancy that employs senior digital workplace consultants, and today specializing in improving that digital employee experience, but not without measuring it. So Esben, if you want to take the floor and share your slides, you're more than welcome to do so.
Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Nico, for that nice presentation. I'm happy to be here and to be able to talk about a topic that I'm quite passionate about. I'll just try and share my slides here, so bear with me 1 second.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah. So you'll be watching Nico as I speak, but he's much prettier than I am, so that's fine. So we'll be talking about digital employee experience today. And before we start, just take a short moment to think about this question. So the question is, how do employees in your company experience the digital solution at their disposal? And I mean, that you can answer a lot, but try and make it on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being a great experience, and just put it down on a piece of paper and have a short think about it. So hopefully you had a short think and you have a number in front of you. See if I can change the slide. So a few additional questions is, why did you give this score? So what made you give it a 5 or 10? What was so great or maybe not so great? And do you really know what your colleagues think about this experience? And also maybe, is it the same for all your colleagues, or is it the same for the people or the person right next to you, but it might be different from people working other places in the organization? So these are some of the things that we have to consider when we measure digital experience, and it's also a little starter for what we're going to talk about today. So we'll come back to these questions. So we have some statistics from the Statistics of Denmark. We gather information across a lot of different stuff, and they came up with this statistics saying that companies with more than 100 employees spend in excess of 100,000 euros per year on IT per employee. So why is that interesting? I think it's interesting to actually know this number, but it is also interesting because it's a lot of money, and what do companies actually get from this kind of money? What kind of return on investment do companies get when investing this kind of money? And would they actually spend this kind of money on anything else without actually measuring what the benefit of it is? So, I mean, you spend a lot of marketing and stuff like that, but you also measure it. With the digital experience, we hardly ever measure it. So interesting that it is a big investment, which we don't really know what we get out of it. So another interesting point why we talk a lot about digital employee experience at the moment is that the post-pandemic work is hybrid. McKinsey and Company did this survey just a month ago saying 20 to 25% of all workforces in advanced economies like the Danish or the Dutch, they would be able to work remotely without losing any effectiveness in the work. So we see this hybrid work becoming the new normal. There's a lot of discussion, at least in Denmark, where I'm placed, that people will probably never get back to the old normal of going into work every day. So we will see more hybrid scenarios. And in a hybrid workplace or a blended workplace, you will see digital experience is the experience of working for a company. We have these stories going around with people starting a new job and never been into the office. So their experience of that workplace is a 100% digital experience. So that's why we right now talk a lot about employee or digital employee experience, and we have this people are going back to work, so we will see a more blended setup. So what is digital employee experience? The technical term or the technical definition, which is still evolving actually. There's a few people around the globe pushing these definitions. Our definition is the experience of all digital interactions an employee has in connection with his work or her work. So it's all the interactions with systems. So it could be interaction with your email, could be an intranet, it could be a line of business system, but it's also interaction with your colleagues, your management, your customers and partners, which is supported by IT. So being on this meeting is actually part of your digital employee experience. So that's how we define the digital employee experience, is all the digital interactions that you have in your work. It's also important to say it's actually about end-to-end design of the digital workplace. So employee experience is not about, it's not purely about IT, it's about designing this workplace experience. And it's important that it is an experience, it's not a technology. So you might have Microsoft talking about a digital employee platform. You might have Nico talking about Itcraft. It is, yeah, definitely. It is the enablers for a digital workplace, but it's not, it will never be the solution for the entire digital workplace. We know in NGAGE, we normally say it's about 20% technology, and technology is so great today that it's about 20% of the project. The rest is designing how we're going to use this technology and amending this technology to our workplace. Another way of looking at experience is this evolution of experiences. So we have the customer experience and we have the employee experience. These are known disciplines and terms. So you look at the customer experience and you design a customer journey. You also have a lot of metrics for the customer journey, certainly with HubSpot and other systems. You can track on your customer, how do they interact with your company. You have employee experience, and HR probably measure employee engagement as well, or employee experience. Post-pandemic, you measured stuff like, is the workplace environment good? Do you have a good lunch setup? Is there space for football and all these things? But as things become more and more digital, as I said, the employee experience is the digital experience. So that's very true for the last, 15, 16 months, where we've been sitting at home, a lot of us. But it will continue to be true, because a lot of the interaction with your workplace is digital. And even if you start getting into the office, it is still a digital experience to be a knowledge worker today, or even any kind of worker, actually. So this is how the digital employee experience becomes interesting. It's kind of derived out of the customer experience to the employee experience to the digital experience. But it's also interesting because it's a lot about how do we deliver a good customer experience. You deliver a good customer experience by having engaged employees. See what I did there? So you have engaged employees, and that's important for having not just an empty process, but you have employees that can actually make a difference. And even though things are becoming digital, I don't know if you ever tried to raise a ticket in a help desk, and you have a great process, and you get notice saying it's now been 24 hours and now been 48 hours, but there's nobody behind this process. It's just an empty process. There's no employees that can actually solve your problem. So that's where you need your employees. And then how do we actually enable these employees digitally to deliver this great customer experience? So it goes both ways. It's the customer experience driving into the digital employee experience. So you can take some of the tech and some of the ideas from customer experience and then put them into the digital employee experience. I'm not sure we will ever measure on click-through rates and conversion rates on a digital employee experience, but we could probably measure a lot more on our digital experience than we do today, and thereby improve and learn a lot of this. But also, without having a great digital experience, you cannot deliver great customer experience. So these things are interconnected, and we can use some of the same ideas, but they're also dependent on each other. So digital employee experience is about designing a great digital workplace that engages employees, create employee value, customer and company value. And I actually put that in that order because you cannot create customer value without creating employee value. That's my experience anyway. And it's not really about just spoiling your employees and making it great for your employees. We do that because we want to create company value. So it drives that back to customer value or company value in the end. Okay, so that's what digital employee experience is. That's how we define it. It's about designing a digital workplace for your employees so they can create great value for your customers and hence for the company. And it's important to say it's an experience. It's not a technology. It's designing this experience. So what are the challenges in doing this? The challenges is that a knowledge worker today has a lot of tasks. These are just some of them. This is probably what your Office 365 can help you with a lot of the way. So there's all these things you have to do. You have to communicate, collaborate. You have to find knowledge and share knowledge. You have to be social. Social is becoming a lot bigger on the digital because of the pandemic, but I think we will see this in the future as well, having more social interaction online with your colleagues. Learning is becoming a thing because we want to create a continuous learning in our company, so we need to build that into our way of working. And then, of course, automation, process automation. How can we create great processes with great people so we can deliver this value? So, and you can add to this task management could be another thing in here. line of business system like the ERP system. Other systems could be added to this circle, and it would probably be different from employee to employee. So that's another complex challenge in this. So what do the IT department do? They come up with a lot of apps to solve these problems. So and these are again the Microsoft apps. So for automation, we use the Power Automation platform. For collaboration, we use Teams. But you end up having a lot of apps with not a lot of integration between them. So you kind of put your employees in a situation where they say, okay, so I want to do some collaboration. Which tools should I use? Should I use Teams? Should I use SharePoint or even OneDrive, which I haven't put up here? So you put this choice on your employees, and then you try to support them with guides and other stuff, which is great, but you still put them in a situation where they have to choose, and depending on who they are, they might choose differently, which is also fine, but you have to have some idea about how can we make this an integrated workplace for your employees. When you do this, just add apps to it, and you could add other apps like Asana and Jira and ERP systems to this. You end up with loss of productivity and disengaged users. If you spend 5 minutes on the internet, you can find a lot of stats on how many apps a knowledge user work. So this stat says to do your work, you have to use 9.39 apps. I don't know how you use 0.39 apps, but and the other thing is that you flip between apps about 10 times an hour. So it's a lot of going between apps, and if you spend a minute thinking about how many apps do you switch between just in your normal everyday life or work life, I think you quite rapidly see this list grow. You might get to 5 or 10, but over a week you probably get to these 10 or 15 apps. And think about apps like you probably go to LinkedIn if you're in a position like Nick and me. Then you go back to email, then you go to a CRM system, then you go maybe to your intranet, and then you go to Teams to do some chatting, and then you go to Planner to do your task planning. So that's 6 apps already, probably within 30 minutes of my workday. So you get a lot of this switching around, and you waste a lot of time searching for knowledge and switching between apps. And really you end up having frustrated, disengaged users who doesn't deliver this great experience to your customers. So you really have to. So what to do about it? Well, to design a great experience, my experience is you have to have coherence between your business strategy, your technology, and your employee strategy. So because this is about experience, it's not about the tech. You need your business strategy to align with your technology and with your HR. From my previous job, I was responsible for help desk, and we were growing quite rapidly as we were a SaaS company delivering internet. So this help desk system we used, we used it, and it was quite well implemented. But then our strategy shifted towards international companies and multinational companies. And in that shift, we trained our employees, and we learned them ITIL and case management and how to write a good answer and problem-solving methods. So our employees and our strategy aligned, but our technology was still the same old help desk system. And of course, we wanted a new system, but we wrote this. We built up this business case saying it will probably be around 30,000 euros to change the system. But there was no interest in doing that because we had a nice system and it was working. But over time, we saw that our strategy and our employees were struggling to deliver on the world-class service because they didn't have the system support they needed. So over time, I got the business case improved, and we saw that once we got the technology aligned with our employees and our strategy, we saw a 70% increase in response rates and satisfaction ratings within quite a short time. So that's technology that was lacking in that case, but a lot of time we, especially with Office 365, we see that companies have technology to build great workplaces, do automation, and use teams to collaborate great. But maybe we haven't trained our employees on how to do that, or we haven't taken the technology to that level and enabled the technology to do more for our employees. So you really have to have a coherence between these three circles to get a great experience. Otherwise, you can have great tech and great employees, but if it doesn't align with the strategy, you're not going anywhere. So to do this, it's also important to know your employee types and their challenges. So not all employees are the same. I sometimes use this case of the experience of going to Disney World is not the same for the parents as it is for the children, and it's kind of the same for your workers. It's probably not the same experience for your CEO as it is for your desk workers in the organization. Or it might be, but then you might have some remote workers or even deskless workers. So employee types and their challenges will differ. So you have to plan a digital employee experience for each type of employee, and probably spend a little time figuring out what your employee types are. When I get into companies, they a lot of times say, well, we have deskless workers, we have workers who always is in front of the desk or the computer, and then we have the managers. Digging into it and doing a demand analysis, we often see that new patterns arise, and therefore it's worth spending a little time figuring out what kind of digital employee types you actually have. And if anything, the last year taught us that we have to be agile because things will change rapidly. So be agile. Don't think you have to do a 2-year project to do a great digital employee experience. Start small and then build on top of that. If you're going to do a 2-year project, you probably end up somewhere where you wanted 2 years ago and not where you should be in 2 years. Okay, so that's about digital experience. It's about what it is, why it's important, and a little bit about how to create it. We can do another webinar about in depth on how to create digital workplaces. But before you start designing your digital workplace, you have to, as Nico put it, first measure, then improve. Yeah. And another clever guy here said, find out where you are, where you're going, and then build a plan to get there. It's so simple, but it's not really. But that's what we want to do. We want to measure first, because then we know where we're starting, and then we can build from there. So to know where you are, you must have data. I used this case with the 100,000 in the beginning, or 10,000 euros. It's another number in the Danish kroners, but 10,000 euros per employees per year. Gartner, this is quite a recent analysis as well, said that in just 4 years' time, 70% of digital business initiative will require some kind of business metrics on it. Today, that's only 15%. So if I have a marketing background originally, this is where marketing was about 10 years or maybe 15 years ago. You spend a lot of money on marketing and you hope for the best. You couldn't measure it really because you couldn't see what did what. And I see a lot of similar cases in IT today. You spend a lot of money and you hope for the best. But if we believe Gartner, in just 4 to 5 years' time, you'll have to prove that this investment you did in improving some kind of digital process actually paid off. Which I think is a good thing, because then we can start learning about what drives value and what doesn't drive value. I've been in IT long enough to know that it's not every IT project that drives value for everybody. So, but what kind of data do we want? There's a lot of there's a whole section of this industry looking at what's called digital experience monitoring. So DEM, another great abbreviation, but digital experience monitor. That's a lot about measuring behavior. And if you're into the Microsoft world, Viva Insights is exactly this. They deliver behavior, and then they try to derive from that what is the experience. But it's really about behavior. Digital experience is about the experience, and it's really hard to monitor by looking at behavior if you have a great experience. So you could spend an hour in Teams, and Insights would probably say, well, that's great. They spend most of the day in Teams, but maybe you spend a lot of the time in Teams because you can't find your way, or you don't find what you search. So it's really hard to look at your digital experience monitoring and see if it's a great experience. Because experience cannot be monitored, you have to ask the users what is their experience, because it's not objective, it's subjective. It's something they feel, and it's something they experience. So you have to ask them what they feel and how they experience stuff to get this metric. I'm not saying you shouldn't do digital experience monitoring, but you should also do other stuff, because otherwise you will only have half the truth, and half numbers you don't understand or you don't have the full image of is very dangerous sometimes. So what is it? What is this DEX benchmark or digital employee benchmark? Well, it's a benchmark based on the employee NPS. So NPS is Net Promoter Score. It's standard for measuring engagement and loyalty. The central part in an NPS is actually coming from the customer side as well. The idea is that you can ask a customer saying, based on your experience with our product or our service, how likely is it that you will recommend this experience or product, service to a friend, family, or former colleague? And then you rate it from a scale to 1 to 10. So the question we did in the beginning was actually a question on an NPS kind of question. So that's the idea, that this is the scale you're using. We use this employee Net Promoter Score to develop what we call the digital employee Net Promoter Score. It's a benchmark we have developed in NGAGE, using our experience from our technical side and also our HR experience, and mixing technology and HR to try and align these two bubbles. And we now have this benchmark, and we actually also have numbers. We don't have enough to be specific on financial companies in Holland yet, but we can give you a general benchmark saying other companies do this. So you actually, in this benchmark, you have two benchmarks. You have the NPS, so you get a feedback saying you are either a detractor, a neutral, or promoter. So that's one benchmark. How do you rate, or how do your employees rate on this? So that's against the general NPS idea. The other is you can actually benchmark against the digital experience of other companies. So you might have a neutral experience on collaboration, and that's the feedback from your employees. But that might be, when you benchmark towards other companies, that might be good or bad to have a neutral. It could be that you are actually outperforming other companies because they have a distractor behavior on this. So that's the two embedded benchmark in this benchmark. Yeah. So looking a little bit on the benchmark, we look at 6 different areas. And try to measure the digital experience within these areas. And these are the areas that we find, and based on experience and dialogue with customers, saying these are the areas that are important in our digital experience. You could have added others, and when we do customer-specific benchmarking, you could add a specific topic like digital onboarding if you want to do measure specific on something. The important thing to say is that we don't measure if you have the right features or if the system you have works the right way. We measure this towards an experience. So there, within each of these categories, we have 4 to 7 questions, I think it is, looking at how does the technology enable you, how does it empower you, how does it engage with you. So within communication, one question is, does your digital solution help you stay connected with your managers or stay connected with your team, or does it? Yeah, so it's these kind of questions more than how do you find teams works for you. So it's more about the engagement than the actual functions in these areas. So it's about enablement, energy, empowerment, and encouragement. So that's what we try to measure, because that's what's in the employee experience. So how does these digital terms affect your engagement? So digging a little deeper into the survey, this is the feedback you will get. So you'll get feedback on your initial category. So this is the detractor behavior. So if you are in a detractor behavior, that means if your answer is somewhere between 0 and 6, you actually have a negative experience. So if people don't know the NPS and they just want to answer neutral, they often answer 5, but that's actually in the NPS a negative behavior. Nico?
No, just reiterating on the NPS. So that's it makes sense. Yeah, if you're not really scoring above average, that means that something is not delighting your employees, you would say.
Yeah, and that's because we're going after this experience of, would you recommend this to your colleague? And if something is fairly average, you probably wouldn't recommend it. But if you find it's great, you would recommend it. So we're not aiming for average. We're aiming for great. I think it's a good aim. Yeah. So you can be a detractor, you're passive, or promoter. So that's the initial feedback we'll give, saying you are within one of these categories. But then we actually also calculate an NPS score. So in the end, you take your percentage of your promoter questions and deduct from your you take your number of detractor behavior and deduct from your promoter behavior, and then you calculate that, and then gives you an NPS score. It could be 32, it could be minus 62, depending on your answers. So your neutral answers is actually not really calculated because it's neutral behavior. So you take your bad experiences and subtract from your good experience, and then you calculate a score, and that's the NPS score. So that's the benchmark we can have. It will be somewhere between minus 100 and plus 100. And there's in the NPS there's some categories saying when is it a good score, when is it a bad score. But then again, you could score minus 10, but that might be compared to the benchmark on this a good score. So that's the way we give feedback, and then we calculate this NPS. And when we do it for a company, we can calculate on departments or locations, but we have to be a little bit careful about the privacy in that. So you don't measure on too small teams. Okay, so working with digital employee experience and digital employee NPS, it's a good long name, so we use more abbreviations. My experience is, as I said, you have to start by finding out where you are. Are we as great as we think, or as bad as we think? Normally, when we ask companies how do you do on IT, we get a lot of talk about firewalls and GDPR and Office 365. It's interesting, but what we really want to know in this survey is how do you employees experience the platform, which is hardly an answer we can get, or we hardly never get it from people. So start by measuring. Where are you? Once you measure, you should measure. Maybe start with a team, but then you should measure the whole organization at some point. And then identify personas, because as I said, experience are subjective. So the experience will be different from your employee types. You can identify the user groups, and then you can identify their pains and what drives digital engagement for them. Because maybe you think what drives engagement is having better integration of the internet into Teams or better learning, but it might not be what drives the engagement for your frontline workers. It might be something completely different. Normally, companies have a fairly good idea of their personas and their pains, but we've seen quite a lot of times when we start doing these demand analysis and persona analysis that you find out that things are slightly different with personas than what companies think. So, so you need to do a persona identification if you don't have it already. Then you need to align with the strategy. So you need to go back to management saying, what is our digital ambition and where do we want to be? Do we want to be a world-class digital company? Well, then maybe we should invest in these areas, or do we just want to be good enough, or where are we in our strategy, and what is our digital strategy for our company? So align with strategy, and then you can start doing your tech projects and your designing. And it might be that you have all the technology in place. You might have Office 365 in place, and that is enough to do what you have to do, but you have to enable the technology by either designing the experience, training your users, or enable some features in the technology you have. A lot of times we also see people actually have to, in the first project, actually shift to an online platform or something else. So the improved part is actually what we normally see as the IT projects. And once you have the platform in place and you've done your first improvement, then you can go from measure to improve, and then maybe the persona and the alignment is more something you do every half year or year, just to check that things are still in place. But you can do this Deming cycle with the ball rolling up the hill with improvement and then measure, standardize, improve, and measure. So going down to it. Okay, yeah, that's what I have right now. So I think we just have a little time for some Q&A, Nico.
Yeah, certainly we do. About 5 minutes. I think this gives a lot of food for thought. How you've described how all of those things relate to each other in the overall experience, but also within the company. Sort of lifting up both the employee experience together with the technology and all these different pillars to improve things. Now, on this live event, actually, I had a bit of a bad experience, or some digital friction, as we might call it. I don't know what happened exactly with my camera, or if I can be in view again.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back in view. Yeah. So what actually happened? Describing my digital friction right here on my experience, and I guess it's that subjective. I couldn't get myself out of view. So I am a producer on this Teams event, and while you were presenting, I did my best to get myself out of view, not to be too distracting. And it's funny how this little experience sort of colors my my subjective experience of this digital tool. Now, of course, I've been in the Microsoft ecosystem for a very long time, so I know things can go wrong. But yeah, I think I'll give a low score here.
Is it now that I start to talk about digital literacy and experience and IT skills?
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe it's my it comes down to my skills in the end. Yes,
could be.
Now there's a few questions because we are running out of time.
Yeah.
And you've described all this measuring. That's a lot more clear with the eNPS and all. But who's the one inside the company that should be measuring this? What kind of role should be collecting this kind of data?
I would really like HR to do this, because it is an engagement survey, and they already do an engagement survey. But an engagement survey, in a traditional HR engagement survey, look at management and communication, and they would say we don't have to look at digital directly, because we look at the general experience. So I would like HR to kind of take up this digital element and say, well, work is digital, so we have to look at our digital solutions. I'm a realist and a pragmatic kind of person, so I think this initiative has to come from digitalization consultants or even IT. Fortunately, we see a lot of companies now have these digitalization consultants, and it would be something that naturally would come for the men. But over time, I would love HR to take this up.
Yeah, because HR would probably say, I don't own the strategy of this company, or I don't know own the IT, or I don't know enough about IT to actually make recommendations about what needs to change. But I guess that's also where things might go wrong, because ultimately this experience, and that's very subjective, bringing that together and listening to people and processing this kind of information and sharing the stories about the actual experiences, that's just generic. That is not something that you need to know a lot about technology. Like you said, technology is only 20% of the whole picture. So it makes sense that
and the measurement or the benchmark is actually more about how do you experience the connection through your company, through your digital media, more than it is a digital setup bad or good. It's more how's the experience of using this. How is the experience of maybe a management to be pushing stuff out to this platform? So you could have the greatest platform, but if it's not used by management, it doesn't make much sense. So it's more, and that's why I think it's an HR thing. It's more people thing than a tech thing.
Yeah, and it's actually also to the point that what I was just now experiencing with that sort of camera glitch on this live event. If I would go to IT and I would argue that I have a bad experience with live events or Teams, they will say, sorry, we've purchased this product, and that's the begin all end all of that discussion. If you don't have a ticket to raise, and a dialogue is finished, more or less. And that's it. But it did give me a bad experience, at least this time. Now we're having this bad experience now, or a relatively bad experience. But if HR is the one asking those questions, how often should they be asking on this topic?
I think you should be asking at least 4 times a year, depending on if you do an employee engagement service. You could align with those, but I would like it to see every quarter, depending on. But also you could if you have an initiative that you planned, you can do a measurement before and then maybe 2 or 3 months after on this specific target group, and saying, so did this project we delivered actually give a greater experience? Because hopefully that's why you implement new IT, is to improve things. So you can use it ad hoc, but otherwise you should do it every quarter, maybe every half year.
And then, of course, to know where you stand, that's where you bring that benchmark, where you're measuring multiple companies and then being able to compare. Because anybody can sort of pull out all of the stops and pour a lot of money into this and buy a great experience, but budgets are still tight, of course, and investments still need to be made in just enabling hybrid workplace environments. So I think that having that benchmark that you mentioned really is a differentiator. But thinking of collecting that kind of information, and that's also with the work analytics of Microsoft that you've mentioned. A lot of people raising questions about privacy, GDPR. How do you make sure that is dealt with correctly, and how do you deal with that collecting this benchmark across different companies?
We don't collect any personal information when we do it for companies, so we just have ID. If you do it internal in a company, you have to be careful not to go into too small units. So if you measure on a marketing team that's only 5 people, you cannot do that. You have to have a wider audience. So otherwise you'll be able to start to identify people even though they are anonymous. And in the data we collect, we have two sets of surveys. We have the company specific, and then we have a generic open free one. And if you do the open free one on our website, we will of course store it internally and also your contact information, but that's under all the GDPR rules and all that in European law.
Exactly, the right to be forgotten and so on. I see that we're out of time. Maybe a final one. I think you mentioned it already about starting small and maybe expanding. How can I start small, or what would be what would make sense?
Yeah, we do this free assessment. So if you want to try it out and get more experience with it, we offer a free assessment for a small test group. I put 25 people, but yeah, we can talk about that. But the idea is take a department or take a location and then try this out to get some experience with it before you roll it out to the entire organization. So you can do that, or you could build your own survey if you are have great experience in building engagement surveys. You can build your own, use forms. We use Microsoft Forms in this, and then you can build it up yourself on your own survey. But otherwise, give us a call, and then we can set something up with us. The difference is we have the benchmark towards other companies, so you will only get the NPS if you do it on your own.
Yeah, and of course you have the experience to connect that employee experience with both the strategy and the technology, because if you're not able to mature all three at the same time, a little bit to the point that you were mentioning about the help desk that you were running, then things run out of sync. So I think for that alignment, that that experience that you have in various companies is also extremely valuable.
And sometimes otherwise you'll just end up with a number saying 32 with just a lot of feedback. Also,
I wish I was still 32.
Yeah, I think maybe it's 42 now, but never mind. Then we also do online personal assessment. So if you just want to click through the survey and try it out, there's a link in here, and then it's on our web in our tenant, in Engage tenant. But it's a public link, so you can go to that and try it out, and then otherwise contact us for a dialogue. I also put my LinkedIn information in here, so you can reach out.
That's great. Thank you very much, Esben, for your time and all of these insights. Again, measuring is hugely important, and as you showed, Gartner is expecting that it will all need to prove our investments in the very near future. So no better time to start with this than today. But for now, the live event, our time is over. I'll be sharing the recording with those that have missed it. I'll also make sure that that link to the free assessment, just to have a look through all the different questions, how to ask them, and the possible outcome that might have, is a great idea. And for more, please contact Esben to get all of his experience to help you out maturing the digital strategy in your company and improving that experience. Thank you very much for your time. This is the end, and have a great day.
Yeah, have a great day, and thank you, Nikki, for the opportunity to speak on this topic.
Anytime. You're welcome.